This happened to my friend Jake, who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in a small town in Ohio. Jake was 16 at the time and had recently moved with his family into an old, two-story house. The place had a certain charm: faded brick walls, creaky wooden floors, and large windows that rattled when the wind picked up. But what Jake loved most about the house was its massive backyard. It was a sprawling patch of overgrown grass, dotted with a rusty swing set that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. At the far end of the yard, a dense row of tall pine trees formed a dark, almost impenetrable wall. Jake was the adventurous type, so he spent most evenings out there, tying a hammock between two trees, listening to music through his earbuds, or just staring up at the stars. It was a humid summer night, around 10:30 p.m., when this happened. Jake was sprawled out in his hammock, scrolling through Instagram on his phone. The air was thick and sticky, but a faint breeze occasionally rustled the leaves, offering some relief. The only light came from an old, flickering yellow bulb mounted on the porch, its glow barely reaching halfway across the yard, leaving the tree line shrouded in darkness. Jake was lost in his phone when he felt something shift, like the air had suddenly grown heavier, the way it does right before a storm. He pulled out his earbuds and listened. Aside from the chirping of crickets and the faint rustle of leaves, the night was still. He told himself it was nothing, but his heart was already beating a little faster. A few minutes later, he heard it, a soft, deliberate crunch, like someone stepping carefully on dry leaves. The sound was coming from the tree line, where the darkness was thickest. Jake froze, his eyes darting toward the noise. At first, he saw nothing but the vague outlines of trees swaying slightly in the breeze. He whispered to himself, "It's just an animal, probably a raccoon or something." But then the sound came again, closer this time, and it had a different rhythm. Slow, measured, like footsteps with purpose. Jake sat up in the hammock, clutching his phone tightly, his breath shallow. Then he saw it. About 25 feet away, just beyond the first row of trees, a figure stood in the shadows. It was tall, unnaturally tall, maybe 7 feet or more, and impossibly thin, like a skeleton draped in a sheet. Its head was tilted slightly to one side, as if it were studying something with curiosity. What unnerved Jake the most was how still it was. It didn't sway, didn't shift its weight, didn't make a sound, just stood there, motionless, like it was staring right at him. The dim porch light didn't reach it, but Jake could feel its gaze, heavy and unblinking, boring into him. His hand started to shake. He fumbled with his phone, his sweaty fingers struggling to swipe open the flashlight. When he finally got it on and aimed the beam toward the trees, the figure was gone. No rustle of leaves, no snap of twigs, no sign of movement. Just gone, like it had never been there. Jake swept the light back and forth, illuminating gnarled tree trunks and a carpet of fallen leaves. But there was nothing. His heart pounded in his chest. He scrambled out of the hammock, nearly tripping over the ropes, shoved his phone into his pocket, and sprinted toward the house. When he reached the back door, he yanked it open with trembling hands, stumbled inside, and locked it behind him. He didn't sleep that night, jumping at every creak of the old house, convinced something was still out there, watching. The next morning, when the sun was high and the backyard looked less menacing, Jake grabbed a baseball bat and went back to investigate. He walked to the tree line, scanning the ground for any sign of what he'd seen. Footprints, broken branches, anything. The earth was undisturbed, the leaves untouched, the trees as silent as ever. He started to wonder if he'd imagined it, if the dim light and his tired mind had played tricks on him. But he couldn't shake the memory of that figure, its tilted head, the weight of its stare. A few days later, something happened that made his blood run cold. Jake was going through photos on his phone, deleting old screenshots, when he stumbled across one he didn't remember taking. It was time-stamped from that night, 10:32 p.m., right around when he'd seen the figure. The image was completely black, as if the camera had captured nothing but darkness. But in the center, there were two faint, glowing white dots, close together, like eyes reflecting the camera flash. Jake swore he hadn't taken any photos that night. He zoomed in, heart racing, but the image revealed nothing else, just those two eerie points of light. He threw his phone onto his bed and refused to touch it for the rest of the day. Jake never went back into the backyard at night. Even now, when he looks out his bedroom window, he avoids letting his eyes linger on the tree line. He says sometimes, late at night, he feels that same heavy sensation, like something is out there, just beyond the trees, watching him. My name's Emily. I'm 20, and I'm a college student in Oregon. This happened last year when I was driving cross-country to visit my family in another city. It was past 1 a.m., and I was beyond exhausted. The road was pitch black, with only the dim yellow glow of my headlights cutting through the darkness, lighting up a small patch of asphalt. All around me were endless fields, broken up by the occasional abandoned farmhouse that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. My eyes were heavy, and I knew if I kept going, I might nod off and crash. So when I saw a flickering neon sign that read Blue Star Motel, I didn't think twice. I pulled into the lot. The motel was a rundown, single-story building with faded brick walls stained with watermarks. The gravel parking lot had just two rusty pickup trucks that looked like they'd been there for years. A bad feeling crept up on me, urging me to turn around and sleep in my car, but I was too tired to listen. I walked into the lobby, which reeked of stale cigarettes and mildew. Behind the counter was a middle-aged guy with graying hair and a wrinkled t-shirt. He gave me a smile that felt too warm, like it was hiding something. He said the motel was nearly empty, with only a couple of rooms taken. He handed me the key to room 12 and said, "It's quiet here. You'll sleep fine." His voice had this fake calm to it that made my skin crawl, but I was too drained to care. I thanked him and headed to my room. Room 12 was at the end of a narrow, dimly lit hallway. The cracked linoleum floor squeaked under my feet, each step echoing in the silence. When I opened the door, a wave of musty air hit me, mixed with the sharp sting of cheap cleaning chemicals. The bed had a faded floral bedspread that looked like it was stolen from a grandma's house. A bulky, ancient TV sat in the corner, and I doubted it worked. I checked the window. It was locked, but the thin, grimy curtains barely blocked the moonlight. I dropped my bag by the bed, locked the door, latched the chain, and collapsed onto the mattress without even changing. The springs groaned under me, but within seconds, I was out cold. I don't know how long I was asleep when a sound woke me up, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone scratching at the door with their nails. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but when I opened my eyes, the sound was still there. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand. It was 3:07 a.m. My heart started racing. I sat up in bed, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint but steady, like whoever, or whatever, was out there didn't want to be too loud. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. The tapping stopped for a moment, then started again, harder this time, like knuckles rapping against the wood. I slid my feet onto the cold, sticky floor and crept toward the door, my pulse pounding in my ears. I peered through the peephole. Nothing but the empty parking lot, bathed in moonlight, with the shadows of the trucks looming like silent monsters. No one was out there. I turned back toward the bed, but before I could take a step, I heard something else, a low, eerie hum, like wind whistling through a pipe, but mixed with garbled, incomprehensible words. It was coming from the other side of the door, slow and drawn out, almost like a moan from something not quite human. The hairs on my arms stood up. I couldn't make out any words, but it felt like it was calling to me, like it knew I was there. My voice shook as I said, "Get lost," or "I'm calling the cops." But the sound didn't stop. It got worse. Now there was a deep, guttural rasp mixed in, like the labored breathing of a wounded animal. Then the doorknob started to jiggle, slowly, deliberately, as if something was testing whether it was locked. The chain rattled, and I was sure it was about to snap. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely hold my phone. I dialed the lobby number, but it just rang and rang. No one picked up. The rasping hum stopped for a second, and I thought maybe it was over. But then came a loud, scraping sound, like claws dragging across the wood of the door. It was sharp and deliberate, like something was trying to carve its way in. I was paralyzed with fear. I grabbed a heavy table lamp from the nightstand, unplugged it, and backed into the corner of the room, facing the door, ready to swing if anything got through. I stayed there all night, eyes locked on the door, every tiny noise, a creak in the hallway, a gust of wind rattling the window, feeling like a new nightmare. When the first rays of sunlight finally slipped through the filthy curtains, I found the courage to move. I threw my stuff into my bag and practically ran to the lobby. The guy behind the counter wasn't the same man from last night. It was a younger kid, probably just starting his shift. I blurted out everything. The tapping, the weird humming, the scraping. He looked at me, confused, and said, "That's weird. There was no one in the lobby last night. The night guy called in sick and canceled his shift. And the motel only had you and one other guest, in a room on the other side of the building." My stomach dropped. I tossed the key onto the counter and bolted to my car without another word, peeling out of the lot as fast as I could. I haven't stayed in a motel since. I still don't know what was making that humming, rasping sound outside my door, but every time I think about it, I feel like something was there, something that wasn't human. And when I drive on dark roads now, I always double-check my locks. The air was chilly, and a thick fog blanketed the park, like a gray curtain draped over everything. It was past midnight when my friend Sam and I decided to check out the park near my house. We lived in a small town in Nebraska, and this park had an old playground that was always buzzing with kids during the day. But at night, people avoided it. Locals whispered about strange things, shadows that moved without a source, swings creaking on their own, even faint giggles echoing from the slides when no one was around. Sam and I always laughed off those stories. So that night, with coffee cups in hand and a cheap flashlight, we set out to see what the fuss was about. The park was a few blocks away, a wide grassy field with the playground smack in the middle. The swings, slide, and a couple of rusted seesaws glinted faintly under the dim glow of a single street lamp. When we got there, the fog had thickened, and we could barely see a few feet ahead. Sam cracked a lame joke about maybe seeing a ghost tonight, but our laughter died in the heavy silence of the park. We sat on a wooden bench, damp and cold from the mist, and started chatting. I set the flashlight on the bench, its weak beam just reaching the swings. About 20 minutes in, I heard something, a faint creak like the sound of swing chains moving. At first, I thought it was the breeze, since a cool wind was drifting through the park. But when I looked, one of the swings was swaying back and forth, slow and steady like someone was sitting on it. Sam noticed too and said, "What the hell is that?" My heart picked up, but I told myself it was just the wind. I walked closer, flicked on the flashlight, and aimed it at the swing. It was empty, just the rusted chains moving in the air. But what freaked me out was that the other swings were completely still. Just that one was moving, like some invisible force was pushing it. Sam forced a laugh and said, "Guess we got a lazy ghost who only swings one at a time." But his voice shook a little. We went back to the bench, but the park felt different now. The air seemed heavier, and the fog felt like it was closing in around us. A few minutes later, Sam grabbed my arm and whispered, "Look at that." I followed his gaze to the slide. At the top, there was a small, dark shape, like a kid sitting there, completely motionless, head bowed. I shined a flashlight on it, but the fog was too thick to see clearly. All I could make out were two faint white dots, like eyes reflecting the light. My heart was pounding. I said, "Sam, this isn't funny anymore. Let's go." But before we could move, the shape jerked. Not like a person, but fast and unnatural, like something yanked it. It slid down the slide at an impossible speed, but when it hit the bottom, it didn't stop. It just vanished like it melted into the ground. No sound, no trace. Sam and I were frozen. The flashlight slipped from my hand, its beams spinning across the ground. Sam yelled, "Run!" and we bolted like maniacs toward the street. We didn't stop until we reached my house, panting, locking the door behind us. We didn't sleep that night. The next day, when the sun was up and the park didn't feel so menacing, we went back to investigate. We checked the slide, a red plastic one with some old scratches. But when we looked closer, at the very bottom, there was a word carved into the plastic: "Don't." It looked like it had been scratched with a dull knife, and I'm certain it wasn't there before. We never went back to that park at night. But sometimes when I pass by, I feel something watching me from the fog, and the creak of those swings still echoes in my head. The road was dark, like an endless ribbon of asphalt swallowed by the night. It was past 2 a.m., and I was driving through rural Montana, heading home from a late shift at a roadside diner. The landscape around me was nothing but sprawling farmlands, with wheat stalks swaying in the breeze, shimmering like silver waves under the moonlight. There were no streetlights, just the weak glow of my headlights carving a path through the blackness. I had the radio on, but all I got was static, the signal too weak out here. I was tapping my fingers on the steering wheel when something caught my eye on the side of the road. A man, holding out his thumb, signaling for a ride. At first, I hesitated. Who in their right mind picks up a stranger in the middle of nowhere at this hour? But as my headlights hit him, he looked ordinary enough, maybe 40, wearing a worn denim jacket and jeans, his head bowed like he was exhausted. Something in me felt bad for him, like he needed help. I slowed down and pulled over to the shoulder. He walked over slowly, opened the passenger door, and slid in. A faint smell of damp earth and cold air came with him. "Thanks for stopping," he said. "Can you drop me at the gas station up ahead? It's a few miles." His voice was low and hoarse, like he hadn't slept in days. I nodded and said, "No problem." I pulled back onto the road, and the car hummed through the silence. I tried to make small talk, asking where he'd been or why he was out here so late, but he gave short answers, got lost, car broke down. Every now and then, he'd turn and stare out the window into the darkness, like he was searching for something. There was something off about him, a heaviness that made my stomach twist. After a few minutes of silence, he spoke again, his voice quieter, almost a whisper. "This road isn't safe. Something's out here." My heart skipped a beat. I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking or trying to creep me out. "What, like a wolf or something?" I said, but he didn't smile. "No," he said, "something you don't want to see. Don't stop for anyone else tonight." A chill ran through me. I opened my mouth to say something, but he pointed to a faint light up ahead. "That's the gas station. I'll get out here." I pulled over, and he opened the door. Before he stepped out, he turned to me, his eyes catching the glow of the dashboard in a way that made them glint unnaturally. "Check your locks," he said. "I mean it." Then he shut the door and walked off, not toward the gas station, but into the shadows. He didn't head anywhere specific. It was like he just melted into the darkness. I sat there, confused, my hands gripping the wheel. I shook it off, started the car, and drove on, his words echoing in my head. Without thinking, I double-checked the door locks. A few miles down the road, I saw another figure on the shoulder, thumb out just like the first guy. But this time, something felt wrong. As my headlights hit it, the figure's face stayed in shadow, like the light couldn't touch it. My heart sank. For a split second, its eyes flashed. Not like human eyes, but like a cat's, reflecting the light with an eerie glow. I slammed my foot on the gas and sped past, my tires screeching. In the rearview mirror, I saw it step into the middle of the road, head tilted, watching my car. It stood there, unmoving, until it vanished from sight. When I got home, my hands were still shaking. I called the gas station to see if the guy had made it. The clerk said, "Nobody's been here tonight. Not a single car since 11 p.m. I never drove that road at night again." I still don't know who or what that man was, but every time I think of his warning, I feel like something was waiting for me out there, and I barely escaped it. And that's the end of this chilling tale, but I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a creepy encounter on a lonely road? Maybe you saw something in the shadows that you can't explain, or picked up a hitchhiker who left you with more questions than answers. Send me your scariest true stories, whether it's a paranormal experience, a disturbing run-in, or something that just fell off. You can drop them in the comments below or send them to my email, insert placeholder email. The creepiest ones might just make it into a future video. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a new tale. Stay safe out there, and maybe check your locks tonight.